Hey Chris, as people enter, and
Yeah,
actually let me just get my thing set up here. Hey, do you have you ever had eggnog?
eggnog. Yeah, it was. I had spent a few winters in the US, and eggnog is really big there around Christmas, New Year. Um, Works really well in cold weather. I'm not sure about drinking it, particularly you in Brisbane, in Australia in summer,
I've
but
never
it's
had it,
close.
and then I got it today from Aldi, and then it's got a recipe on there for summer eggnog where you're supposed to have it cold with ice cream and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I don't know. I've never had it before, so that's why I thought I'd try it. Um, welcome everybody. Welcome to Ben's Book Club, the very final. You can see I'm very festive today. The very final Ben's Book Club for the year. We just let everybody sort of enter. And what we normally do with Ben's Book Club, if you're a new person here for the book club, we just invite, you can see some people in the chat already. Chris, you can look at the chat too, I think, if you can figure out the Zoom thing. But we normally get everyone to say hi and where they're from. Hopefully, everyone's dressed up accordingly. Ian, as always, man, very welcome here. Thank you for tuning in from the UK. Absolutely massive. Mandy from Diamond Creek, hello, welcome. Kath has not finished the book yet, so we better not get into spoilers today, Chris. Hello, Kath from Bathurst. Yeah, sorry. She actually said, please don't spoil the ending. We won't spoil it for you. Fiona from the Gold Coast. Robert from Brisbane. Hello, guys. Milo from Sydney. That's awesome. Enjoyed the book. Chris from New England Northwest. Naracoorte. Oh, I have a great story about Naracoorte. I love that place. I was in a
Well,
band in
it's
Melbourne, and
actually relevant to the Seven. The Seven has two BNS balls in it. One's Bachelor and Spinster balls, right? One set in the 1990s and one set way back when they were proper formal things back before the First World War.
Mhm.
Well, way back at the start of the 80s, I went to a BNS ball in Naracoorte. So there you go.
There you go. My story is from when I was in a band. We traveled 12 hours to play a show in Naracoorte in a van, and I took my brother. It was the first time I took him on tour with us, so that was really special. Jenny from the Gold Coast. I was on the Gold Coast today. I was at White Water World with the kids when the power went off and everything. We had to, yeah, we were on their second slide and the power went off and all the water stopped going. So we ended up we just came home. So it was a bit of
I,
a,
I was in Burrawa the other night, which is a little town sort of halfway between Yass and Cowra, doing a book event, and lightning struck, and yeah, the power to the entire town went out, and still wasn't back the next morning.
oh,
The
wow.
the book event continued by candlelight and whatever, and
That's kind
then
of nice. That's
dinner
romantic.
by candles and lanterns. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, nice. Penny from Perth, Steph from Central Coast. Steph is saying that she laughed very hard in your in the Seven, and I think I remember this because it's a little while ago I read this book. But there's a
Yeah,
little part where you mention about the film,
yeah.
or yeah, was that the author sort of peeking his head out from behind the book a little bit?
It's a little bit meta, yeah.
A little bit meta. Penny from Perth, Kelly from Brisbane. Kelly loves all your books, Chris.
Yeah.
Oh man, sorry. There's a lot of people here. This is really exciting. Sorry, I'm just gonna. Deb from Gawler. Sorry, I'm reading all your names. Peter from Sunshine Coast. Peter needs more Chris, please, is what he's saying. We need more Chris Hammer in our lives. Brooke is saying that she had to explain to her niece what a BNS ball was and how magical it all was, but they don't do them anymore. There's no concept. I had to explain to one of my classes the other day, Brooke, because I'm a teacher. I found a bunch of floppy disks and I brought them in, and they said, "Oh, you 3D printed the save icon."
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Um, we are here today with one of our, I think, dare I say it, our very favorite guest, Chris Hammer, is here today for Ben's Book Club. Just in the chat, if you're not a part of our book club, I've just put the link there if you want to go and join up. We are running all the way through next year as well. We're lining up authors as we speak. But let's introduce Chris. Chris, I almost don't need an introduction for Chris. He is one, I think, of the Australia's most acclaimed crime novelists. His first book, Scrublands, was an instant bestseller when it was published in mid 2018. So this guy, you had a couple of books before this, but you really hit the scene with your crime fiction in 2018. So we've only been familiar with your writing for a few years now, but you're already fast established as one of Australia's, I think, most popular writers. Scrublands was recently made into a TV show, which we'll talk about tonight, and it won the prestigious UK Crime Writers Association's John Creasy Award for debut crime novel in 2019. Shortlisted for a bunch of things. Silver, Trust, Treasure and Dirt, The Tilt, and now The Seven. All of these are bestsellers. All of them are very, very readable. I think all of them are very rereadable as well. Like they're fun to go back over. But yeah, let's welcome Chris. Virtual claps, yay! Chris, first question: what are your Christmas traditions, Chris? Do you have Christmas traditions? What are some things that you observe over the Christmas period?
Well, I live in Canberra, and uh, strangely enough, for people of my generation who grew up in Canberra, my brother and sisters still live here or have returned here. And uh, my father died a few years ago, but my mother's still here. She's still alive. She's 90. So we all get together for Christmas. We get on well. Back in the day, Mum would cook the big full catastrophe Christmas dinner, the turkey sort of thing.
Yeah.
No matter what the temperature outside was, we had the big roast.
Mm-hmm.
But for the last 20 years, we've revolved it between my brother, my sister, and I. I'm glad
Mm-hmm.
to say it's my sister's turn this year. So we get together, and between the three of us, we've got 7 kids, all of whom have left Canberra except for my daughter. She's still here, she's 21.
Yeah.
Ages range between about 20 and 40, but often as many of them and their partners who can make it come as well.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
it's a fantastic day because that next generation, they all just get on so well with each other. They adore each other. So that's our tradition.
Yeah.
And then so we have it in Canberra, and then usually following that, some or all of us will head to the coast
Mm.
and have a bit of beach time.
That's okay. So you actually do the beach on the day. That's nice.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, nice.
yeah, a lot of Canberra people head to the coast for Christmas, but we have Christmas here.
Yeah, okay. That's nice. I like that. Do you ever think about putting Christmas into one of your books? Because Christmas in traditionally in like I always think of Lethal Weapon and Die Hard and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Like Christmas is Home Alone. It's ripe for action, ripe for crime.
It is. It is. I know statistically, there's a lot of murder happens around Christmas time,
Yeah,
which
yeah, a lot
is
of
kind of sad, right? But
well, I think
unfortunately, a lot of it's just messy and ugly and not very entertaining.
not
Uh,
nice to write about. Yeah.
but no, it's a good point. I haven't really thought about that, but I should do.
Well, hey, I think yeah. Well, let's see. We'll see where we go. Um, People in Ben's book club too, and I think most of us here are familiar now. But if you want to ever write anything, questions for Chris, I can see some people have already put some things into the chat for Chris. We'll be going to your questions for sure today. This is an opportunity for you to touch base with Chris and ask him any of the questions that you have. But I wanted to ask you just about before we get talking about the Seven, which is your latest today. I wanted to talk a little bit about Scrublands, the TV series. Are you happy with it? How has it been going? It's looking like it's smashed, like all of your stuff. It just seems to smash all records and just does remarkably well. How have you found it, and how has the fans' reception to it been?
Look, I've really liked it, and you're right, it's done very well, and it's being shown around the world. So it's already been on the BBC,
Oh,
and
great.
it's on their version of iView, which is called iPlayer. It's going to be on in the States. I think it's already been New Zealand, Ireland, Germany, places like that. So
Wow.
that's fantastic. I
Yeah.
really like the show. It's not completely loyal, faithful to the book. In fact, there are some plot lines that they've changed significantly.
Hmm.
But I'm kind of pretty relaxed about that.
Yeah.
I like the fact that they've been able to reimagine it and
Yeah.
try and make it work best for the medium of television. So, for example, one of the things they do in the book, um, this isn't really a spoiler. The book starts with a priest who seems to be, quite happy with himself, gregarious, whatever, goes into his church, comes out a few minutes later and shoots five of
Yeah.
his congregation dead. And the way they've depicted that on the screen is completely accurate to just where the people are positioned, how they're standing, all of that. It's great. But then the book goes from there to a year later, and
Yeah.
this journalist, Martin Scarsden, arrives in the town, uh, not to investigate the murder. Everyone thinks they know why the priest shot these people. He's just there to write a story about how the town is coping a year on, a
Yeah.
so-called anniversary story. But as he begins to write it, he starts to question whether the version of events that has been told by the police and by the media is accurate. So he's told all this stuff about what happened back then a year ago. In the TV show, they've got Martin arriving in the town, but they've shot the second timeline. So they've cast the priest, guy called
Mm.
Jay Ryan does a fantastic job because he gets the kind of anger and edge in Byron Swift, but also the sort of the vulnerability and the sensitivity of him as well. Something we could. So they've done that, for example, and that works much better for
Yeah.
television. It works much better. So I'm very happy with what they've done, and I'm elated with the reception.
Oh, that's great. Um, I think those, yeah, you sort of do have to make the TV series its own thing, right? Like it would if it was just faithful to the book. It's almost like read the book if you want the book to be faithful to it, but they do have to sort of run with it. I think that's where the best TV and film adaptations come from, is when they feel this creative passion for it. Were you involved much in all those decisions, or were they sort of made like, and you just sort of saw the end product?
I wasn't um, involved that much at all, but I was happy with that. The production company behind it, Easy Tiger, has got a fantastic track record. So they're the ones that made the adaptations of Peter Temple's Jack Irish books. A lot of people would have seen those on ABC, the
Yeah,
one
yeah.
starring Guy Pearce.
Guy
They're
Pearce,
the
yeah.
company that did Rake with Richard Roxburgh.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
They're having a really big year at the moment. They've got a number of big sort of national, international hits like Column from Accounts and The 12 with Sam Neill or whatever. So I
Oh, I know
knew
that one
it
too.
was in
Yeah.
good hands. And also a friend of mine, a Canberra-based screenwriter, Felicity Packard, was the chief writer on it. And
Oh,
every now and
cool.
then she would just send me a text, ask for a bit of advice. But for the most part, she had the courage of scripting it.
Yeah,
I
that's great.
think originally they had it down for a six-parter. Some money fell through, so then it was brought back to 4 hours, which I think actually works. It means the pace is kept up, and
Yeah.
also if you want to watch it, you can binge it.
Yeah.
Pretty much in one sitting. It's 4 hours. Watch
Janet's
two
just said that in
episodes,
the
have a
chat. She
break,
watched
and
it
come
all in
back and
one
watch
sit.
the other two.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, Janet's just said that in the chat. She's just said, watch the whole thing in one sitting. Loved it.
Mm.
That's a good way to hit it. Um, before we get into the seven, there's a couple other things I wanted to cover, but I wanted to know if you had, and I wanted to invite chat as well. We've had a whole year's worth of Ben's book club, a whole year's worth of reading. Chris, what would be your recommendations for, besides buying, by the way, too, I bought Scrublands for our English faculty. We give books to each other for Christmas, so I bought
Oh, yeah.
Scrublands. It was pretty fun. Um, besides this book, what are some books everyone would recommend for Christmas? We're looking for those stocking stuffers, looking for those good summer beach reads. I'd recommend all of Chris's, but Chris, are there any things that you'd recommend?
Look, I've been so busy this year, I haven't read as much as I'd like to. A couple non-crime books.
Mm.
Limberlost by Robbie Arnott. It's
Oh,
more of a literary book, but it's not a big book. It's very readable, very accessible. Story of a young guy growing up in Tasmania
I love that book.
several decades ago. Uh, Yellowface, which is an American book, and it's very clever. It's a story. There's a struggling young author. She has a frenemy, a woman who's madly successful, um, but she's very envious of it. And this frenemy dies, and she steals a manuscript, pretends it's her own, and then becomes this overnight sensation. And it's the fallout, the consequence of that. It's quite funny. It's quite dark. Um,
I really need to read that one. A lot of people have recommended that one.
yeah, and again, it's quite a page turner. It's not like, and it's not a huge book. It's not that
Yeah.
challenging. Of the Australian crime books, I Margaret Hickey's book Broken Bay. This is set down on the limestone coast in South Australia,
Broken
where
Bay.
they have the sinkholes and people go scuba diving in sinkholes, and it's a murder set there. Great characters. So I really enjoyed that. The last two books I've read just in the last week or two are not really going to be stocking stuffers because they haven't been published yet.
Oh, okay. What are they?
I'll give it a shout because this happens, in the writers' community, people's advanced copies are shared around for to try and get endorsements, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a great book called All the Words We Know by a guy called Bruce Nash, and it's an old woman in a retirement home with what seems at first to be, some sort of dementia, and she's having a hard time remembering things. But it's quite a compelling story. It's not like a cozy crime. It's not a humorous sort of Richard Osman type book. It's a bit meatier than that, but again, a great read. And the other one I've just finished is Bodies of Lies by the wonderful Sarah Bailey. And that'll be out next year too.
Oh, I didn't
And
know she had a new one.
yeah, and it looks like it may be her last book with her detective Gemma Woodstock,
I've
who's,
read all the Gemma Woodstocks.
yeah, she's one of maybe my favourite sort of detectives. So I was sad when I thought,
Oh
oh, maybe it's going
no.
to be the last one.
Oh
Um,
man.
so
We
I'm
have
not
to
sure
have
when
her
that's out,
on.
but that's one to look forward to as well.
We'll put that. I need to put that on a note somewhere to give to Mel, who runs the whole show. But we need to have Sarah on for sure. That's a great one. Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone else as well. Oh, look, Mel's typed in chat. Yes, Sarah Bailey will be
Okay.
on for a new book. That's awesome. Very excited to chat with Sarah again. Um, that's great. Thank you, Chris. And if anyone else wants to recommend anything, I invite you guys. I'll put it in the chat again. There's the Facebook group, but if you want to go and recommend and have a chat about anything else that you'd support over the course of Christmas, especially, go and recommend stuff on the chat, on the Facebook group. I think it can be an excellent place to do such a thing. Awesome. Excited for all these things. I need to read that Yellowface for sure. And Limberlost I love especially. Um, and lastly, before we turn to the seven, we're here really because, and the whole, all this program, everything we do is because of the Libby app, because of Overdrive, and because especially of libraries all across Australia. Um, but Chris, I wanted to just have a chat with you about the importance of libraries. Why do you think they're such an important part of our everyday lives? But then, as well, how have libraries been a supporter of you and your work?
Well, I think every writer, before they're a writer, they're a reader. And I grew up
Mm,
in a house full of books. Both my parents were former school teachers. And for me, a highlight of the week was, the trip to the library, with my little green sort of cardboard library card, and I could get my four books out.
hmm.
I loved it. It was like entering a magic kingdom, if you like, all those books that I could borrow. So in that sense, libraries, without libraries, maybe I wouldn't have become such a reader. And if I hadn't become such a reader, I wouldn't have become a writer.
Yeah, that link's
But,
so
the-
important.
but in the present day, I've just done a long book tour. The Seven came out a couple of months ago, start of October. Toured for about a month. Pretty much all my events or the majority of my events were in libraries. So libraries hosting authors as a way to help us, as a way of helping promote Australian writers, Australian writing and literature, but
Mm,
also as a service to the community. So
yeah.
people can come along. They're always free events um, to come along and meet authors. And, I particularly in regional areas, there may not be a bookstore. The library's a real community hub. It's not
Mm,
just go and borrow books. They have all sorts of events. They have book clubs. Um, they have clubs for children. So it's always good to go to a library and, you got lots of kids playing and there's always an area there. In this sort of heat wave weather,
mm,
it's an air conditioned place. It has the computers, so you often see the elderly pensioners there, using the internet, that sort of thing.
mm.
And it's really been hit home to me how important they are, because this year and last year I went to the UK, and the libraries there are in dire, trouble. They're shutting libraries down because
Oh,
they
that's no
don't have
good.
enough money,
Yeah,
um,
right.
or the government isn't giving them enough money, put it that way, and so
Yeah.
they're losing that resource. And then you see it here in how healthy our libraries are and how well attended they are. You don't never walk into an empty library. There's always people there using them. So I reckon they're a um, huge part of our civil life, our civic
Mm,
life, and of our cultural life. Um,
mm,
yeah, no, I love libraries, and the other thing about books, and like all authors, I like selling books, but they're expensive, right?
yeah.
And we run into people say they're retired, they might read 3 books a week. So if they were paying full retail, recommended retail, that'd be $100 a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who can afford that? So I don't see libraries as, say, competing with bookstores or anything like that. I see the two actually support each other,
Mm,
because people who are borrowing books from libraries, I think, are more likely to be buying books than people who don't go to libraries at all.
yeah. I often get people saying, like I know Ian in chat, we read How to Be Remembered by Michael Thompson through the book club here that we do. And he's gone on to recommend that to I think every single person that I've seen
Yeah,
on Twitter. But you find these readers that perhaps you wouldn't have found before through libraries. Um,
absolutely.
and I really love too that someone set up here. I think it was Chris Purchase in the chat. Ben's book club brings literature to the outback. Like I'm really pleased that we get to go through this program. We get to go into these regional places that don't get a lot of author visits. It's like you're visiting us in our lounge rooms right now. So yeah, I agree with you, man. Libraries are so important. I especially have those memories too of being a little kid with the big bag that you got to fill up with all your goodies and come home. It would be sad to think that we'd miss out on such a thing if libraries weren't around, hey?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, let's move into having a chat about The Seven, which is your latest book. How long has this one been out for now, mate?
So about 2 months, came out at the start of October.
And how have you found the response to The Seven? Like, how have people been talking, people lapping it up?
Oh, look, it's yeah, really good. A lot of people are saying they think it's my best book. Not everyone. It's interesting that people have individual tastes. So some might nominate Scrublands, but pretty much all the books have their champions. But quite a few people are saying that the Seven's their favourite. The Seven and the one that came out last year, the Till.
Yeah,
I know the sales have been exceptionally strong, stronger than any of the previous books,
that's great.
and that's probably partly word of mouth, but partly just building a
Mm,
readership over years. So I'm absolutely delighted, and the critical reception's been excellent as well.
that's
So
awesome.
no, I'm completely stoked.
That's great. And do you have any people who are still sort of holding on to Martin? And then when you moved away in Treasure and Dirt to Ivan and Nell, they're like, "Oh, bring back, we need our Martin, Scarsden, Dose." Do you still have people with those questions, or are people very happy to read about Nell and Ivan?
No, I do get those people. Me included. I, so there are a crossover of characters in the books. So the first three books, Scrubland, Silver and Trust, feature Martin and his partner,
Hmm.
Mandy or Mandalay Blonde. And then the second three books, Treasure and Dirt, The Tilt, and The Seven, are built around the two detectives, Ivan Lukic and Nell Buchanan. But there's crossover, there's characters that appear in both books. So Ivan was a very minor character in those first three Martin Scarson books. And, if Ivan and Nell at any point want to talk to a journalist, why would I invent a new journalist when I've got a perfectly good one sitting there with Martin? But
Yep.
so I'm already working away on my next book because even though the Seven came out in the start of October, I really finished working on it in July. That's when I signed off on the final edits. We were doing
Yeah.
the final proof edits. And so it's important for me then to crack on. So I'm writing another Ivan and Nell book. But when I saw the TV series, it
Hmm.
was quite strange actually. Yeah, so I'm sitting down, I was by myself. I watched the first episode. They gave me uh, an advanced copy, a link so I could watch it before it came out. And there's a shooting scene, and then it's unfolding. And the weird thing is, it really sucked me in. I was really wanted to watch. I wanted to watch the next episode to find out what happened
Oh,
next.
that's great.
So the thing is that set me in mind. And by the time I'd finished, I thought, oh, these are such great characters. So I am thinking at some point, maybe not this next book, but maybe the one after that, I'll do another. I'll do another Martin and Mandy book.
Very excited to read that. I would really, yeah. And the way, and I know you haven't done this in like a mimicry sort of thing, but it reminds me of the Bosch, Harry Bosch and Mickey Haller sort of combo. Well, that's a lawyer and a detective, but the idea that they can touch each other's lives and can sort of come in and out, mate.
Yeah.
It's some of
Yeah, I
the
really
most
like
fun you
that
can
too
have.
about Michael Connolly's books. Also, I think as a kid, I really like the Tintin books.
Yeah,
They're a bit the same. So you've got the same main characters, Tintin and Captain Haddock and Thompson and Thompson, the detectives. But
yeah.
then you have all these minor characters, particularly the Crims, and they won't be there for two or three books, and then they'll pop up again. And I always just loved that as a kid. So maybe that's the influence on me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just such a fun way. Like people can pick up the Seven, I think, and just read it as it is. But then, and not to spoil anything. Sorry, I've forgotten the person who said not to spoil it. Was it Fiona earlier? We're not spoiling anything, but Martin does stick his head up a little bit in a pretty like it's not nothing. Like he's a kind of significant to the story. But seeing that and knowing him so well from your previous work, I just felt such joy as a reader. I was like, I felt like I'd solved a puzzle or something, or like I had some secret knowledge.
It's an interesting thing you say there, though, Ben, because people who discover my books may simply pick up the latest book and read it, and then go back, and they
Yeah.
read them in strange orders, and it doesn't seem to affect the enjoyment much
No.
or at all. They say it works fine, and that's partly the nature of crime fiction books, even if they have continuing protagonists like Martin or Ivan and Nell. You have to, but by the time the book's finished, there'll be some sort of mystery.
Mm.
Someone's died, who did it, why have they been killed, etc., etc. Well, you've got to tell the reader by the end of the book, right? So
Yeah.
inevitably they're kind of self-contained, and most
Yes.
it's a bit of a personal storyline and narrative arc going across the books, but it's pretty minor. So yeah, look, if anyone hasn't read the previous books, it's not an impediment to reading the Seven. Or
Narelle's just said that in
yeah,
the chat as well. This is her first book of yours she's read, and she said she didn't feel like she missed out on anything. But I'm sure, Narelle, you're probably going to go back now after this one and then sort of discover where it all came from, right? Oh, look, and Steve has said something similar. The Seven was my first of Chris's book. It certainly stands on its own 2 feet. It doesn't. We don't need to know all the backstory of the characters. And the trick is, though, Steve, right? Like you kind of want to go back and learn more about them now. At least that's the way I read them. Um, I've read them all in order, though. I've read every year, mate. I get a nice Chris Hammer gift under my Christmas tree that I get to enjoy. I appreciate you writing so much. Um, how is that timeline for you, though, mate? Like just the production of words, the production of you write really intricate stories, like with a lot of stuff going on, a lot of research into, I mean, especially with this book, with water and politics and founders of a town, a lot of character work, a lot of they're so intricate, but you churn them out. Like, is it hard? Like, do you have to burn the midnight oil sometimes to get words out, or do you find it okay being a journalist and being sort of used to deadlines?
Look, I might have to burn a bit of midnight oil with the one I'm working on because I'm a bit stuck at the moment.
Oh,
But that happens from time to time.
yeah.
Look, most authors in Australia don't earn enough money from their writing to do it full time, so they're holding down full time jobs. They've often got young kids, that sort of thing. Ben, I think this probably sounds pretty familiar to you, right?
Hmm.
So you're kind of writing in part time. I'm fortunate I can write full time. My kids are grown up, so it's all I have to do in a sense. And the other thing is, I love doing it. I'm really addicted to this
That's
idea that you can sit down, in the morning, and by lunchtime you could have just created something new out of
mm,
out of nothing essentially. And so for me, look, I have to at times, yeah, I have to approach it with a bit of a professional eye, but for most of the time, it's not like work. It's more like my hobby. And
that's
and
nice.
and but then at the end of it, you get that box of books, and this arrives, and you go, oh, "Holy cow, I did that!" So it's a wonderful feeling. So no, I'm in a very happy place, Ben. Being able to work away on my books because I just love it.
You've cracked the code of make your thing you love your job. You figured it out.
Yeah, yeah, I guess.
That's awesome. Um, have you ever have you ever been like writing a scene and then just felt the sudden urge to murder one of your characters?
Well, you often get this. So in the universe of crime fiction authors, it's often split into two camps: the plotters and the pantsers. And I know a
Mm.
lot of people listening to this will be familiar with this. So the plotters plot everything out in great detail, and then they start writing their narrative, and they know exactly where they're going with it. But I'm in the other camp. I'm a pantser, which is the shorthand for saying that we write by the seat of the pants.
Yeah.
So I'll begin writing, and I'll have a setting typically. So this setting for the Seven was this kind of irrigation scheme, a privately developed irrigation scheme. Had a bit of an issue. So there's a number of issues in the book, but the one that was there at the start was kind of water trading. What happens if criminals got involved with that, and an event like a murder. And now I realise the other thing I've really got to decide fairly is the point of view characters, whose story who's telling the story.
Yeah.
Um, but then from there, I don't know where I'm going. And at some point, I get stuck because I can't work out what's happened. At other points, I can feel the pace of the story starting to lag. And that's a very important thing, particularly in any kind of genre fiction. You can have a very captivating, beginning.
Mm.
You can have the wonderful sort of mystery, and at the end of the book, you can have a very satisfying resolution. But a lot of books are let down because they kind of drag a bit in the middle. And I think we've all read books like that.
Yeah.
So there's a great bit of advice by the US master of the hard-boiled detective Raymond Chandler. He's the guy who came up with Philip Muller.
Yeah.
The ones that when they were made into movies starred Humphrey Bogart. So he's writing back in the 30s and 40s, and his advice was, if you find it lagging a bit, you just have a man enter the room with a gun. And then you work out later who the man is and why he's got a gun. So,
Just do
um,
something, yeah.
so I'm a bit like that. I feel like, and so maybe instead of a man with a gun, maybe it's someone else getting killed.
I can
But no,
just
I tend to get really fond of my characters, and there's a few who have died over the years, which I almost regret because they are such characters. Anyone who's seen the TV series will know, the priest Byron Swift in Scrublands is a fascinating character, but of course he is dead. People have suggested I do a sequel, but like a prequel.
yeah.
But yeah, I can't see how that would work.
Yeah, because you'd sort of know where it was going the whole time, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can, not to, again, I'm not spoiling anything, but there is certain moments in this story where I was like, oh, like now, full on some stuff happens. Like I can just sort of see your fingers going, and then, what would happen if she died here? Just, it's funny to me to think of you toying with our emotions like that every day, just in your room there with your fingers tips on the keyboard.
Well, yeah, I haven't sort of gone that far, but I remember in the first book of Game of Thrones, the guy who's the hero, Ned
Yeah, Ned
Stark,
Stark.
and you think it's a traditional kind of story. He's the hero, so he can't die, and then he dies, and it's like, whoa, what? You can
Shock,
do that?
shocking. Ah, I remember I read that book before the TV show was made, and
Yeah,
and
me
I didn't
too.
know that part was going to come, and it did. It threw me. I was like, he can't be dead.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're not murdering any characters. I just thought I've always wondered how you do those sorts of make those choices. I imagine it would be pretty difficult. But let's talk about the Seven. Where did this story first arrive to you? How did it first present itself to you as a thing you wanted to pursue?
So I think the f- so Ivan and Nell, I like their kind of their emotional involvement,
Hmm.
the cases they investigate, so impacts upon them. They've got some personal issues, etc. So I thought they're good. I can do another book with them. They're not, they haven't run their course yet. In the previous book that came out last year called The Tilt, it's set in the Barmah Forest, so a real place down on the Murray River.
Yeah.
And a lot of that book concerns water. And I thought, oh, maybe I can slip a water trading kind of storyline into that. Someone can be involved in that, a bit of criminality. And anyway, it didn't happen. But I had that idea of this water trading. Now, in my time as a journalist, when the first Murray-Darling Basin Plan was brought in by the then newly elected Rudd government, I reported on it for the Age newspaper. I was based in the Press Gallery in Canberra. So I knew all about water trading and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. So it's
Yeah.
not something I had to research. So that idea, I'd also been to this little town um, where one of the locals had pointed out, she said, oh, there's this, she just pointed out someone, oh, he's a member of the seven families. I mean, what are the seven families? She said, oh, well, they're the original, squatting families when the European settlement first came. And she was kind of joking about them, thinking that they're kind of the Bunyip aristocracy, that they're a bit above everybody else. And I thought, that's not a bad sort of story, kind of a dynastic sort of type power story. How much
Mm.
power? And you do get country towns um, uh, where they have these exclusive clubs. When I went to uni in Bathurst, there was the Bathurst Club, and I know down at Echuca, there's the Echuca Club. Traditionally, men only, membership by invitation. The old squadocracy. A few professionals, local lawyers and doctors, that sort of thing. So you
Yeah.
do get this kind of class stratas in country towns, um, which maybe people living in the city don't realise. When we think of sort of stratified classes, we think of England, but it is there in country towns. So that was the two ideas that I sort of had: water trading, a town dominated by seven families, and then I because I was in water training, I thought I'll have a murder right up front, and the guy gets murdered. Is one going to be a member of one of these seven families? I'm not sure that was
Mm.
right at the start, but also that he was an accountant. And of course, an accountant, particularly in a country town, you think they know everyone's kind of financial state of health.
Hmm.
They know that they're privy to a lot of information, accountants, um, them and lawyers and doctors and whatever, but particularly accountants. So that was my kickoff point.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
and then later on, so the story starts. You've got this accountant, and he's found dead, murdered, in rather spectacular circumstances in an irrigation canal on this fictional irrigation scheme called Wondery. And Ivan and Nell come to investigate. Uh, they start, digging. They
Yeah.
start realizing there's more criminality here. They start suspecting all these people. There's a threat of violence. There's real violence. There's this kind of, if you like, a race against time to try and catch the killer or killers before they kill again. So
Yeah.
that's a kind of in some ways a standard, crime fiction narrative arc. But interspersed within the interwoven are two other storylines. One from
Yeah.
the 1990s, a young bloke called Davis who's the heir to one of these family fortunes, and then another story set way back begins in 1913. It's from the point of view of a young servant girl, part Indigenous servant girl, who's been sent to be a domestic servant for one of the seven families. But this is back before they develop the scheme, so she's there right as it's first being discussed and can witness some of the machinations behind that.
Yeah.
Her
Yeah.
story's told in letters. So you're reading the book and you got these three storylines. And apart from the location, at first there doesn't seem to be any obvious links between the three stories. But as the book, progresses, the reader starts seeing the links between the three different storylines.
And I really, it's one of the things that I love that you do is that we're not just focused on the investigation. We're not just focused on sort of uncovering details of the past through the investigation, but we actually get to live from moment to moment the things that have been investigated. I just think that's a really engaging way to read because there's all these little links and you're sort of sometimes ahead of the investigation and sometimes you're behind and all those things are really fun that you get to sort of know a few things that maybe Ivan is still and Nella figuring out. That stuff's so fun, I think, as a reader.
Yeah.
Um, when you're writing, is the writing really your so you've almost got like this premise and you've got this idea and you've got these different things you want to focus on, but then the actual process of writing is you investigating your own story a little bit. Is that how you think about it?
That's a good way of putting it, actually, Ben. So sometimes it feels like, I'll write myself into a corner, go, that doesn't work, chuck stuff out. It's not a very efficient way of working. So if I've tried plotting, plotting sounds a lot more efficient to me, but it just doesn't work for me because I'll be following a plot, and then I just get a better idea, or I
Hmm.
think, oh no, that doesn't work, or whatever. But yeah, so sometimes, I'll just run into a blind spot and I'll go for a walk or a bike ride or a swim or something, try and think it through, try and work my way through. But sometimes, yeah, it's really like the story is already there. I've just got to uncover it. I've got to discover. It's like this person's been killed, and it's almost like I'm the detective. I've got to
Yeah,
work
that's
out
cool.
what's happened.
Yeah.
I know that sounds a bit strange, but yeah, that's what it feels like.
No, I kind of like that though, because it's sort of, I think that helps with the element of surprise. And I think the Coen brothers talk about that, especially with how they plot their scripts, in that they say if we know something's coming, if we know the plot from start to finish when we start writing, the audience is going to sense it. Like it's going to bleed into what we do. But when we're as surprised with where it goes as the audience is, it's a lot more yeah, that surprise is more engaging, I guess, and earned though. And it's a remarkable thing that you do is that you tie all this stuff together so well, so it feels very plotted, Chris.
That's because you're reading the 15th draft or something.
Sure, sure. So you have to sort of go back and like weave
But
things through a little bit.
I'm great. I'm so glad to hear you said that about the Coen brothers, who of course I love their stuff. Who doesn't?
Hmm.
But yeah, when I first started writing crime, I thought that that you have um, this big reveal
Hmm.
where you tell the readers, who done it, that sort of thing. What's happened? And I thought, well, how do you do that though? Because if you put too much information, the reader might guess
Yeah.
halfway through the book, and so the rest is going to be a fizzer. But on the other hand, if you withhold too much information and don't give the reader a chance to guess it, that they feel cheated, right? So,
Mm.
so the sweet spot is when it's all revealed. They haven't guessed it, but
Mhm.
once it's revealed, they go, "Oh yeah, of course, because this clue and that happened and that happened," which is perfect, right? But I didn't know how to do it. I mean, how,
Mhm.
how, how do you actually bring it on? So
Where is
one
that
thing I
sweet
did
spot?
was
Yeah.
I thought I have more than one plot line, which helps explain, why my books are probably a bit lengthier than most crime fiction books, because I've
Yeah.
got three or four plot lines going on. And part of the reason there is just that, well, someone might guess one plot line, but they're really unlikely to guess all of them,
Mhm.
particularly because, like the Coen brothers, I don't actually know what's going to happen
I
myself.
love that.
And I have in some of my books had person A as a killer and got to that point and go, oh no, that's a bit predictable or it doesn't quite work. And then I'll someone else is the killer, someone who I haven't been suspecting. So it's a weird way of working, but it works for me.
Yeah. It's almost you as much as we talk about how the sausage gets made, it's almost unknowable. Like it's almost this magic process and how it comes together and how it works. It's almost like it's hard to discuss. It's almost you have to just it's the doing of it is what it is, and it's just you can't piece it together, and somehow it works.
True. I love talking to other authors about this, and what you learn is everyone's different.
Hmm.
So, the way I work, the way we're all going to be, sometimes we're just completely poles apart. What I was saying before about the plotters and the pantsers. Um, if I read their books, I think it's very much two sides of the same coin. So they're not as far apart as you might think at first. But when you read the finished book, unless you know how they work, typically you can't guess. If it's a good book that
Yeah.
works, it's a good book that works.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. I used to read Richard Flanagan. I still read Richard Flanagan. I'm yet to do question seven. I saw someone recommended that before. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to that.
Yeah, I
But
love
when
his
I
books
read,
too.
yeah, when I read Narrow Road to the Deep North, it felt very pantsy. Like it felt very. He's just going to dip in over here in the future, and then we're going to go back, and then we go into the romance, and it just felt very like he was naturally feeling where these things should come in. But I listened to an interview with him, and he was talking about how rigidly he structures things,
Is that
and
right?
how he's very heavy into structure and plot, and it blew my mind because it just felt very natural. But it's like you say, it's hard to tell on the other side of it, right? You're just under the spell a little bit of each individual author.
That's interesting because yeah, the first book of his that I read, Gould's Book of Fish. I think I've read most of
Mm,
his books. I haven't read the last Question Seven yet. It bounces around quite a lot in like time frames and whatever. But
yeah,
yeah,
that's what I thought. Like it's yeah, and see whether or not he uses that word structure to mean plot, or whether you know what I mean. Like it's a different thing for each different author. Um, if you can believe this, guys, we're nearly out of time. I don't know how the heck this has happened, but I say this every week when we're starting to chat with authors. But now's your chance. If you have any questions for Chris, you want to put this in the chat, we'll definitely go to your questions now as well. We did get one from Norel, which I love. Is there a Barnaby Joyce inspired character, or am I just imagining that?
you are just imagining it, but you're not the first person to suggest that. So there might be a link.
Ah,
So there is a local MP called
yeah.
Otto, and of course Barnaby first came to prominence as a Queensland senator, and he lived in St George, which is far western Queensland, but it's an irrigation area, so maybe subliminally that crept in. But no, because the guy there is in the book is an independent. He's left and he's started his own party. So I
Mm.
guess in that regard, he'd be a bit more like oh, I don't know, a Clive Palmer or a Pauline Hanson
Or a Bob Catter.
a Bob Catter or a Jackie Lambie, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
so no, if there are any similarities between him and Barnaby, it's certainly not deliberate.
Thank you for the answer, Chris. Mandy has a question here about your use of multiple timelines. If you don't mind, Mandy, I'd love to add to it too. Her question is, how do you write the multiple timelines and actually keep track of everything if you're not plotting? And can I also ask, do you actually write, so, you're writing from the point of view of someone like Bessie in this novel, do you write her whole thing out and then interweave it, or do you just jump back and forth as you write? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you write her whole story and...
Yeah, a bit of both actually.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I'm bouncing between the two. So I'll until I've got a kind of first draft done and worked out, and on a computer screen it might say draft 5 or something. Um,
Yeah.
but until I've got that basic, I know what's happening and can start polishing it. I'm happy with how the plots come together. Um, I will write. Um, I'll write the whole of, say, one storyline together. So that's to ensure there's a kind of consistency of voice.
Oh,
So
wow.
in this one, Bessie's letters are quite stylized. So the
Yeah.
language and the feel of them, the sound of them is totally different than, say, the other two sections. The present day storyline, which in this book is Ivan's point of view. Nell's very much a present character, but she's not a point of view character. She was the point of view character in the last book, The Tilt. It's told in present tense, and then the storyline with David set in the 1990s is told in the past tense. So I'll stick to one storyline and make
Mm.
sure the language and the feel is consistent, and that the pacing within the story works. And then I bring them back together, and then I don't want one storyline lagging. I don't
Yeah.
want one storyline getting ahead of the other storyline. So then I've got to manipulate it back. So sometimes I'm working with a structure as it is in a finished book, and sometimes I'm breaking it out and just going and writing the individual storylines. So
Nice.
yeah, it's back and forth.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I hadn't thought to ask you that question before, but that's a really interesting way of approaching it. We've got a couple of questions here, one from Alex and one from D Robinson 26. But they're both asking, how much do you draw on what you learnt in your journalism career? And yeah, how often have you been able to use those real life stories from your journalist background in your fiction?
Well, one of the reasons I used Martin in those first books as the protagonist is because I knew journalism. So he's not based on me. He's more based on some of the messed up war correspondents I met over the years. I used to travel. I had 2 long stints as a kind of roving foreign correspondent for SBS. And most of the time I wouldn't be in war zones, but every now and then I'd go into, somewhere that was pretty violent. And I met these people, professional war correspondents who are really messed up, not post-traumatic, just traumatized. Um, but the reason I picked Martin is because it's something I knew about. I knew how
Yeah.
journalists work, so I didn't have to research it. Um, but then there's some of the issues. I was a political reporter, so so one of the issues that surfaces in the Seven, it's just in the background. I'm not trying to lecture anyone, but it's about political donations. In Australia, it's quite opaque. It's something like 40% of donations to political parties and politicians are opaque. You can't find out who's giving the money, why they're giving the money, and what they're getting in return. So
Mm.
that's just something I knew from being a political journalist. I also, I covered the environment and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. I wrote 2 non-fiction books too, which have been kind of travelling through the landscape. And the first one of those, The River, was right at the height of the millennium drought, the summer of, say, 2008, 2009. I travelled all the way down the Murray-Darling Basin from the headwaters up in Queensland, down through New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, down to the mouth of the Murray River.
Mm.
So I learnt a lot about the environment then, about climate change, about water trading, about Indigenous history, about the cultural importance of the bush to Australia, all this stuff. And really, that book's got 9 chapters in it. One chapter is set in a town way out in the western Riverina called Warcool, an irrigation town that had no water. The river was bone dry. So that's the inspiration for the town in Scrublands. The town in Scrublands doesn't look like that town, but it has that in common, a bone dry river. The other place I went, there's a chapter on the Barmah-Millawa forest, which at that point was dying. People thought that it might die altogether. But then in recent years, with these La Nina systems, the forest was flooding, which is what it needs to renew itself. And I went and visited it, and I thought, this is great. So that's the setting for the book, The Tilt.
Yeah.
And it's great because the forest is kind of like 3 settings for the price of one. One timeline it's in flood, in another timeline it's in drought, that sort of thing. So you can see that very much what I've done as a journalist, as a non-fiction writer, has informed my fiction books.
Mm.
Not all the time. I mean, nowadays I'm writing, with Ivan and Nell as the protagonists. I was never a crime reporter or a court reporter, so I've had to basically make it up, but then also research it and fact check it a bit as well.
Yeah, right. And just as a note too, if any of you are interested in reading any of Chris's non-fiction work, what are the titles again, Chris?
The River and the Coast.
Yeah,
I'd
so both
recommend the river more than the coast. I sort of ran out of time and money with the coast, but yeah, the river is, and you can still get it, I think.
with some loud cars in your background there, mate.
Yeah,
I just want to
a
make
lively
mention.
place, Canberra.
You can get both those books on the Libby app as well. So if you want to look on the Libby app, and hopefully with your local libraries and how that all functions, but yeah, check them out because I haven't read them yet, Chris, but I've talked to you multiple times, and you do make mention of them and how they inform everything you do now. So if you want to get the full Chris Hammer experience, it's worth going back for, I think. Steph, I'll just put it into chat here. I think we're just about out of time, unfortunately. But if you want to join the book club, it is absolutely free. The Facebook group is the best place, and I've just put the link in chat. If you want to click that, I just post a lot of updates in regard to authors coming up in the schedule and links to register for tickets and things like that. Oh, sorry, I see. Thank you, Steph. Here we go. That's a bit better. Thanks, Steph. I was posting it just to me and you, Chris, so
Okay.
hopefully everyone can see the link now.
Thanks, Steph.
Yeah. Thanks, Steph. You're a good troubleshooter. Maybe we need to employ you, I think. Just go on there, and then we've got the whole of next year. We're running the club again. We'll obviously very desperately want to have Chris Hammer return with his latest things that is going on in his life next year. If he's still available,
I better write another book.
better get finished, I guess. Narelle has said, "Thanks, Chris, for giving me a character with my name." That's nice, and thanks, Narelle. Narelle's also
I love Nell. Nell's such a great character.
She is, yeah. Yeah, is the next one, sorry, can we know? Is it centered on her point, like, how you have to choose a perspective? Can we know?
I think it will be. Because
Nice.
if I do the 3 timelines, it'd get a bit confusing if I had both Ivan and Nell as the point of view characters. They are in Treasure and Dirt, which is the first book they're in, but there's no other timelines in that book. So it's the first time they meet, and that it kind of works for that book. But yeah, I'm thinking at this stage that it'll be Nell again in this new book.
Love hearing that. Love her. Love learning all about her family and the tilt, all that stuff about her times and Yeah, that stuff was really cool, and it does feel like there's more meat on that bone for sure to sort of work out. Yeah, we might just hang out, wait for Mel. I think Mel will invite you back if you want to come in and say a few things, Mel. We're very welcome to have you back. This is the star of the
Here
show,
I am.
ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Mel O'Brien from Overdrive in a very blurry screen. I just want to thank you all for your participation this year. Libby and Overdrive really appreciate you turning up every week. And Chris and Ben, another great chat. Fantastic, a fantastic hour to spend with you. And I look forward to seeing you all next year. And we've got a great lineup starting again in January with Jack Heath. And then I won't tell you what's going on. We've worked out February, March, April so far. And then
Nice.
we'll get the others sorted out after that.
That's awesome.
What's been, yeah, sorry, Ben.
No, I just wanted to say, everyone in the chat as well, and I'll just make sure I actually send this to everyone again. But if you want to go there and maybe just hit on the comment threads and just try to start to recommend authors you'd like to see on Ben's Book Club, it certainly can't hurt to, I'll send all this stuff over to Mel, and Mel's the man.
No,
So,
it's fine. Yeah.
yeah,
It
we'd love.
depends on the publishers, as you know, because we like to make the books available through the library so you can borrow them without waiting. So that depends on the publishers. And both Ben and Chris's publisher, Alan and would have been fantastic the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But we have talked to others. And so if you have recommendations and authors you'd like to meet and you'd like Ben to talk to, we'll do our best. But
Mm.
otherwise, you'll get a real mixed bag. And I think
Yeah.
we've got to test Ben out and see what his interviewing skills are like. So
Yeah. I think the one that was furthest outside of my wheelhouse this year was growing grapes might be fun. That
growing
was
grapes
probably
was a good one. Yep.
it was a good one, but that was most outside my wheelhouse. The retiree, non-fiction story of her growing grapes. It was good. It was fun. I like reading outside of my normal mode. That's part of, I think, the joy of reading is discovery, right? And this is why this program's so cool.
That's the point.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you especially, Chris. Big hand to Chris. Go buy his books. Go put the 7 in stockings around Australia.
Okay, have a really great Christmas, everyone, and a great summer.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. And sorry, very quickly, Kathy. Yes, we are meeting in January. Stay tuned to the Facebook group. I'll be posting links to the event coming up. It will be the fourth Tuesday of January, I think, at this stage, but we'll confirm all that and just stay tuned to the Facebook group. All right, Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas to Ian in the UK. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Mel, for the year.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Bye.
Bye.